He's the Colorado husband and dad accused of killing his wife on Mother's Day in 2020. Barry Morphew says he didn't do it.
Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please do whatever it takes to bring you back.
Now, newly unsealed documents are laying out what reportedly happened before his arrest last year. And we're learning that Barry Morphew allegedly did a full rebrand before he was apprehended and charged with murder.
He was the only one known to have the substance found in his wife's remains. Read that again. Not from a true crime forum, not from a speculative podcast, from a formal grand jury indictment filed in the state of Colorado. A legal document prepared by prosecutors and presented to a panel of citizens who then decided there was enough evidence to charge Barry Morphew with the murder of his wife, Suzanne. That document does not use words like possibly or maybe. It uses words like only one. And when a criminal indictment uses the phrase only one, that is not rhetoric. That is the entire architecture of a prosecution. Picture a locked room. One door, one key. Now imagine that the key was found in a man's pocket.
And the outdoorsy activity that Suzanne Morphew had gotten into in 2020 was mountain biking. And on Mother's Day that year, she decided to go for a ride. After several hours, her daughters, who were not home the weekend she went missing, they were concerned because their mom had not come back home and they hadn't heard from her.
She did not come home. Her daughters, who were traveling that weekend, sent her messages. The messages were never delivered. They called police. Deputies arrived at the home and found Suzanne's car still in the garage. That detail matters. She always took her car when she went riding. The bike was gone.
So look, it's odd that her car is still in the garage. You hear her daughter's boyfriend saying that she usually takes it when she goes mountain biking, and there was no sign of forced entry. There were no broken windows in the house. So at this point, she's a missing person. All of this is just odd. Deputies went out searching for Suzanne, and eventually they track her bike down. It was less than a mile from her home. But an interesting part of that was her helmet was 0.8 miles from her.
The car was not, and there was no sign of forced entry anywhere on the property. Barry Morphew was not home that day. He had left before sunrise, he said, for a job near Denver, more than 2 hours away. He told deputies Suzanne was asleep when he left. He said he did not wake her to say goodbye. When investigators eventually reached him and he returned to the scene, they walked him to where Suzanne's bike had been found, less than a mile from the house. And standing there, with his wife still missing and no evidence of any attack, Barry Morphew asked deputies whether it might have been a mountain lion. His wife had been gone for hours. There was no blood, no tracks, no evidence of any animal. And that was the first frame he offered. Investigators noted it and said nothing, but they noted it.
It's gonna be okay. I'm here with my daughter. She's at Barry's house.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah, you can go down there.
Is it a crash?
I mean, the bike looked, the way it was laying, it kind of looked like it, but there's not really that much damage to the bike. That's the thing.
Lion?
Yeah, it was just like
Was
lying.
there no lion? Mountain
I didn't see anything that would.
I didn't see anything, and they're not letting us go over the site
Because we're getting a track
dogs. We're bringing dogs.
just right down in here.
Now, many have pointed out just how quick Barry was to say, was it a mountain lion? Maybe that was a red flag in this case. That seems like a huge leap from a missing person to if they've been.
The key was always in one place, and one person was always holding it. What the records reveal about Barry's movements that day is where the paper trail begins to tighten.
Morphew. So let's talk about Barry that day and where he reportedly went before Suzanne allegedly went missing. So he said he was on a work trip. He said that he left early that morning before daybreak, but investigators, they talked to his coworker, and this is where things kind of get weird because that coworker said they weren't supposed to be up near Denver until Sunday night. And the employee in Barry were actually supposed to ride together, but Barry, just on his own, decided to get up early that morning and leave around 5 o'clock. The coworker then said when he finally got up to Denver, Barry hadn't brought any of the tools they needed for this job, and none of the work hours after he had arrived in Denver had been done. Now, after looking at surveillance cameras, deputies say that Barry Morphew spent less than a half hour at the job site.
According to investigative reports, Barry spent less than 30 minutes at the actual job site near Denver. His coworker later told investigators that Barry had not brought the tools required for the job, that no work was completed after Barry arrived, that Barry had decided entirely on his own to leave hours earlier than originally planned. Surveillance records indicate Barry spent the rest of the day driving through the Denver area, dropping items into trash cans along the way, according to authorities. And when his coworker went to the hotel room where Barry was staying that night, he noticed something that the hotel staff later confirmed was out of place: the smell of chlorine.
Where Barry and this coworker were going to stay. And back in 2020, that coworker, he tells the Daily Mail that he goes to the hotel room where Barry was staying, and there was the smell of chlorine, which the hotel staff says is odd because, first off, they don't got a pool at this hotel, like one of those indoor pools that just stink up the entire place with chlorine. But also the cleaning staff allegedly said they don't use chlorine to clean the rooms. So why would it be there? And remember, we're now in 2026.
This hotel had no pool. The cleaning staff did not use chlorine products on the rooms. There was no explanation for why that smell was there. And when Suzanne's remains were eventually recovered years later, her bones were described in official reports as significantly bleached. Now consider what investigators found when they searched the Morphew home on the day Suzanne was reported missing. Among the items collected was a needle cap, the kind that fits a tranquilizer dart. Authorities allege it came from Barry's clothing, recovered from the dryer.
So the deputies grabbed some shorts from the house and they put them in a plastic bag and they have Barry walk away from the home. But listen to this moment here and what the deputies seem to say to each other about possibly those shorts meaning something more than just being an article of clothing that belonged to Suzanne.
What you grabbed, right? Those shorts? Yeah. Those are for mountain biking. Yeah. Like the padded shorts you were wearing in the mountain bike. Yeah. So, that, I'm curious.
Yeah, I saw that they were bike shorts.
Yeah.
The deputy had mountain biking shorts in his hands in that bag. And it's the kind of shorts that someone would wear when they go mountain biking. So why would the shorts be at home and not with Suzanne, who went out for a ride that day?
Not the garage, not a shed, the dryer. The working theory that investigators developed and presented to a grand jury was precise: that Barry shot Suzanne with a tranquilizer, that she attempted to flee, that he pursued her until she lost consciousness, and that he then killed her and disposed of her body before driving to Denver to establish the appearance of an alibi. Both of their daughters were away that weekend. The house was empty. The timing, according to investigators, was not accidental. And here is the ticking clock question that the evidence had been building toward from the very beginning. If Barry Morphew was asleep in his hotel room near Denver in the early hours of May 10th, why does truck data obtained by investigators show his vehicle moving between 3:25 and 3:49 in the morning, during the exact window he claims he was not behind the wheel? Cell phone records deepen this further. Barry's phone went dark on May 9th at 2:47 in the afternoon. Suzanne's last recorded electronic activity was at 2:11 that same afternoon. Barry's phone did not come back on until 10:17 that evening. It went dark again at 4:37 the following morning, then turned back on at 5:37 as he headed toward Denver. The phones of two people in the same house went quiet within 36 minutes of each other on the afternoon before Suzanne was reported missing. Only one of those people was ever seen again. The key was always in one place, and one person was always holding it. The first arrest came in 2021. Charges were filed. A trial date was set. And then the case collapsed. Not because
In April of 2022, right before Barry was set to go on trial for murder, prosecutors said they could not go forward with a trial, and they asked for charges to be dropped because it turns out the district attorney didn't turn over evidence to the defense, and several of the state's witnesses were barred from testifying. And that district attorney, her name is Linda Stanley, she ended up getting disbarred over it, and Barry walked free. But the judge did say that prosecutors could one day refile charges. So at that point in time, you have Barry Morphew. He's not facing charges. He's free to go. And it was unclear what happened to Suzanne. It was unclear if Barry was ever going to face charges again.
Stanley was subsequently disbarred. Barry Morphew walked out of custody. The judge noted that charges could be refiled. For a period of time, it was unclear whether they ever would be. And during that period, Barry Morphew moved to Arizona and started over. He began going by a different name. Not Barry Morphew. Lee Moore. A clean identity in a new state, living with a woman who, according to her own account to investigators, had no idea who he really was or what he had once been accused of. Then, on September 22, 2023, Suzanne Morphew's remains were found in a shallow grave a few hundred feet from a road. The majority of her bones were recovered. They were bleached. A medical port, used for intravenous treatment, was found alongside her, a device tied specifically to Suzanne's cancer care. So were pieces of bike clothing she was known to wear. But here is what the forensic anthropologist concluded in the indictment. The clothing showed no signs of decomposition. Which means, according to the expert, she was not wearing those clothes when her body decomposed. She had been dressed afterward. And the location where she was found was almost certainly not where she had originally been placed. She had been moved. The staging was documented. The science confirmed it. And then came the chemical analysis. The autopsy found the presence of BAM in Suzanne's remains. BAM is an animal tranquilizer. In 2020, only a single company in the United States produced.
Quote. Now that, again, huge development in this case back in 2023. But now as we look at the indictment that Barry Morphew is now facing, there may be a smoking gun, figuratively speaking, in this case. And it is a tranquilizer chemical cocktail called BAM, B-A-M. The autopsy found its presence in Suzanne's remains. It is a tranquilizer that is often used on animals. Now, remember, in the initial case that Barry Morphew faced, the narrative that prosecutors were allegedly going to go with was that Barry used a tranquilizer on Suzanne. This now seems to potentially bolster that argument. This next part, frankly, made my jaw drop when I read it for the first time. Because back in 2020, when Suzanne allegedly was murdered, there was only one company in the US that produced that chemical mixture, BAM. And someone could only get it if they had a prescription from a veterinarian. Now, it's important to note that the Morphews moved to Colorado from Indiana back in 2018. And back then, Barry worked as a deer farmer, according to the indictment. And he bought BAM in 2018 before they moved to Colorado. Investigators looked to see who else in the surrounding counties had purchased BAM. And this part is the jaw-dropping part. Quote, records further showed that no other private citizens or private businesses in any of the surrounding counties had purchased BAM prescriptions from 2017 to 2020. Other than the local park services, Barry Morphew was the only one known to have the substance found in his wife's remains. And in bold letters, prosecutors write, ultimately, the prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry Morphew. A grand jury.
Barry Morphew was rearrested in June of 2025 during a traffic stop in Arizona, where Colorado law enforcement had been coordinating with state authorities for months and had obtained a warrant to place a GPS tracker on his vehicle. At the time of his arrest, he was still living under the name Lee Moore.
At the local sheriff's office. Now, an interesting twist is that the woman who he was living with allegedly told investigators that Barry told her that his name was something other than Barry. He was going by Lee Moore. But she said 5 days before he was arrested, Barry allegedly unveiled to her what his real name was. And he also told her that his wife had been abducted in Colorado. Now, had Barry given her his real name, simple Google search obviously would have brought up who he was and what he was once accused of. So maybe he wanted to hide that part of his life. Might be kind of a deal breaker when it comes to starting a relationship if she knew that about him. But then on the other hand, the woman told police that she met Barry in December of 2024 and they moved in together in May of 2025. So why did he allegedly come clean to her about his real name only 5?
The woman he had been living with since December 2024 told investigators she did not learn his real name until 5 days before he was taken into custody. He also told her, at that point, that his wife had been abducted in Colorado. Abducted by an unknown party. That was the version of events he offered to someone who had no reason to question him. A woman who, had she simply searched his real name online, would have found every detail of what he had once been accused of. He kept that name from her for months, and then, 5 days before his arrest, he told her the truth, or at least a version of it. Barry Morphew is currently awaiting trial, out on bond under electronic monitoring. His defense team has requested additional time to review evidence, and the trial has been pushed to potentially mid-2027. Suzanne's siblings have described the ongoing delays as anguish. They have flagged Barry as a potential flight risk. The court has continued to grant extensions. And so the case sits, organized in filing boxes, supported by prescription records and truck data and chemical analysis and the documented conclusions of a forensic anthropologist. All of it pointing in the same direction it has pointed since the very beginning. The grand jury indictment in this case is a matter of public record, available through the Chaffee County District Court in Colorado. We encourage you to locate and read the specific section detailing the BAM prescription cross-reference and the forensic findings regarding body staging. Then come to the comments and tell us this. Given the totality of the physical and documentary evidence already on record, what do you believe will be the single piece of evidence that decides this case for a jury? If this breakdown gave you a clearer picture of how the evidence has been built in